Hi students, today we're going to learn a little bit more about Blender physics. There are two types of rigid body physics. Active, where the object is affected by gravity, it interacts with other rigid body objects, and passive, where active ones will interact with it, but it will not be affected by things like gravity. So today I'm going to show you how to add an array modifier. That's basically just taking one object and creating an array, and I started with one cube. I could make an array of 10 cubes along an x-axis or array of 10 cubes along the z-axis. We're going to show how the origin point will impact how objects are affected by gravity. We have had an opportunity to look at these different settings. Mass, dynamic, collision type, and shape is one that we haven't talked about too much. The collision type and shape is like an invisible bounding box. If you ever do an animation and you've got your objects jumping out of the scene or huge gaps between them and it looks awkward, maybe add a collision type and shape to it. The convex hull is pretty good. The mesh is the most precise. This object goes precisely around the mesh object. And then this sphere, for example, adds an invisible sphere around the cube to create different effects in the way that they're interacting with each other. The surface response, we've looked at friction. 0 is no friction, so it would be slippery like ice. And 1, I think, is the maximum friction, where there'd be hardly any movement between the objects because they just hit each other and go, ugh. And then bounciness. 1 will make it really bouncy. We learned how to copy rigid body settings when we were using multiple pins, and we wanted to be able to apply the settings to one pin, and then we hit F3 and copied the rigid body settings to all of the other pins. Today we're going to be looking at having a floor and the objects interacting with the floor. Your floor is passive. We can increase the bounciness, and that's going to kind of enhance the bounciness of your objects as well. And of course the sensitivity we decreased last time so that our objects weren't just sitting there vibrating all over the place when we press play. Let's take a look in Blender. We have a cube. If we look at it from the front view and hit 1, we can see that it is below the plane where we would normally put our floor. So I am going to increase the location along the z-axis. Let me try 1 and see what that does. When I increase it 1, that brings the bottom right up to the floor. I'm going to increase it to 1.5 so that it's almost to the floor, but not quite. And then let's go ahead and deselect the cube. So I'm not adding a plane to the cube. You can do Shift A and mesh plane, S to scale that plane, and I know we all know how to do that. I'm going to hit 1 for front view. Grab my cube now, and I just want to move it off to the side, so I'm going to hit G to grab and move it, and X along the x-axis. And I think I'm going to scroll back a little bit so I can see a little bit better. Now I'm going to create an array like I was telling you along the x-axis. So let's take a look at modifiers. I'm going to go ahead and add the physics properties to the floor. So clicking on the physics properties button, select rigid body. Bring this out a little bit to the side so I can see what I'm doing. And for the floor, we want it to be passive because we don't want the floor, when I press play, to fall with gravity. My cube is going to, so let me just for a moment grab this cube, and I'm going to G, Z and slide it up, and I'm going to apply to it a rigid body. I will make it active. It's dynamic, so it's going to be impacted by gravity. If I press play, and I need to make it so that this doesn't end at 250 because that's going on too far. I'm going to try 10 frames and see how that goes. 10's not enough, you can see, and I could probably go to 60 to see the full animation. Now, what would happen if I had the floor as active as well? Oh, look, the floor is dropping too, which could be a very cool effect if you were trying to make it look like the floor was dropping out from underneath somebody. So I'll just go ahead and reset my floor for passive, grab our cube, and I'm going to reset it back so that it is on the z-axis at 1.5 and bring it back to 0. So now you can see in my animation, it just falls a little tiny bit. Having my playback at 0, I'm going to create an array now, And we're going to do that here at this wrench where you have modifier properties. And then you have this drop-down box of add modifier. And so this is where you can find the array, and you have some Boolean properties, which if you've done 2D, you might have done some Boolean properties in there before. You can do that with 3D too. You have masking, and mirroring is one that's really fun. You've got that screw, which is what we use to make the pin, fluid simulations, explosions, collisions. So there's a particle system. There's a lot of really cool stuff, but I just want to teach you how right now to make the array. You'll notice that the cube got a little bit bigger, and that's because now there are 2 of them. And if I come over to here, you can see that the count says 2, and you can increase the count so you can do 10, for example. And then we're doing this, this is going along the x-axis. We can create an offset, which is just a little bit of space between each of them. So let's say I want my offset to be 1.1, and you can see this space. You could make it bigger if you wanted to. You can even go to 1.01 if you want that space to be really small. And I think I'm going to go ahead and do 1.1 just out of my own curiosity to see how this is going to work. We can also add another array. We can take those 10 and have them moving up along the z-axis. So I'm going to pan down a little bit here to give room for those new blocks that we're going to place here. I will add another array. And when I do that, you just have to scroll down a little bit and you can see the second array is here. Right now, it's offset along the x-axis. Let's make the x 0. And let's have that array be along the z-axis so that it is going up 1.1 like I did in that one. And now you'll see that I have a count of 2. So there's 1, 2. Now I can increase that. Now I can have 3, 4, 5. So I'm going with that. I like the way that looks. That's going to make a fun animation. Once we have our arrays, then we need to click apply. Now let's press play and see. So they're just falling as one object. I'm going to hide the floor for a second. And I also had hid my camera and my light, so I don't have to deal with selecting. I'm going to hit A to select all. P is not going to work unless I'm in edit mode. So let's try edit mode and P and separate by loose parts. Press play and see what happens. Okay, so wow, that's quite the animation there. All right, I'm going to go back to 0. Does it look like my blocks are falling separately now rather than as one? Yes. Why are they all going to the left though? That's my question. Let's go ahead and go back to 0. They're going to the left because of where the origin is. If they are all falling to the left, and I'm back in object mode now, that means that their origins are in the bottom left. I'm going to hit A and I'm going to go object, set origin to the center of mass. Now, if I press play, you'll notice that instead of all of them toppling over to the left, they've just fallen down and landed in place. Let's pause and just take our animation back to 0. Let's go over to the physics properties. I'm just going to click one of these and it's set to active just like my first one. Let's see, I can change the shape of the collision here to a sphere just so we can kind of see what that would look like. Remember how you would select all of them and then hit F3, copy rigid body settings. All of them now should have the sphere. Yes, they do. Let's press play and see how that impacts it. Didn't really have an impact. I'm going to make the floor active. I'm going to go to the surface response of the floor and I'm going to increase the bounciness to 1. Press play just to see what that does. Didn't do too much. What if we increase the bounciness of our objects too? So let's increase the bounciness to 1 and then select all of them. This is going to select the floor, which is why I'm going to hide the floor. The other way to find that F3 is to go to Edit and Operator Search. That's the F3. And there's your Copy Rigid Body Settings. So let's see if it worked. The bounciness is 1 on all of them. Now let's press play and let's put our floor back on and see how that impacts the animation. Oh, okay, so we've got some major bounciness happening. What happens if we slant our floor a little bit? Let's go ahead and grab that. And I'm gonna just rotate this a little bit around the y-axis so it's kind of on a slant. G, Z, and grab that floor and bring it down a little bit. I'm just curious, so let's see. That creates a nice effect. Of course, I need to increase my ending to be able to see the entire effect. Now, of course, you can add color, make your floor, have some material, make a material slot, new, floor, pick a nice color. Maybe you want to apply that wood to it that we did the other day. Now I've got a nice wooden floor. Maybe I want to make a red block here, so I'm going to add a material, just call it block, and this one's going to be red. Oh, and it made all of them red since they're part of the same array. Press play. And isn't that lovely?